در 40 سالگی انقلاب نشستی از سوی شورای ملی مقاومت ایران که سازمان مجاهدین خلق ستون اصلی آن است در اینجا در کلاب واشنگتن برگزار می شود که سخنگوی پیشین وزارت امور خارجه امریکا به همراه سونا، صمصامی و علی صفوی از مسئولان مجاهدین در این جلسه شرکت دارند. آقای صفوی، امروز دقیقاً 40 سال از پیروزی انقلاب اسلامی میگذره. از دید شما نتایج و دستاوردهای این انقلاب چه بوده؟
مقدمتاً عرض کنم که این انقلاب اسلامی نبود. این یک انقلاب مردمی بود که توسط مردم ایران و نیروهای انقلابی، سازمان مجاهدین خلق ایران، سازمان چریک‌های فدایی خلق و بسیاری دیگر از نیروهای دموکراتیک علیه دیکتاتوری سلطنتی و فاسد شاه به پیروزی رسید. یک انقلاب مردمی بود و آرمانهاش آزادی، دموکراسی، حقوق بشر و همزیستی با همسایگانش بود. متاسفانه آخوندها به دلیل سرکوب رژیم شاه و حذف نیروهای دموکراتیک، اعدام و زندانی کردن اونها، تونست رهبری انقلاب رو غصب کنه و انقلاب رو از مسیرش منحرف بکنه. و خب میبینیم توی این 40 سال آخوندها هیچی برای مردم ایران جز ویرانی، مرگ، فقر، فحشا، فساد و دخالت در کشورهای خارجی به ارمغان نیاوردند. بنابراین رژیم ایران یک رژیم ورشکسته است و در واقع رویای خمینی برای صدور ارتجاع تحت نام انقلاب به کشورهای منطقه با شکست مواجه شده و حالا بعد از 40 سال زمان سرنگونی آخوندها فرا رسیده و مقاومت ایران با مردم ایران به صورت سازمان یافته این رژیم رو سرنگون کرده و به زباله‌دانی تاریخ خواهند فرستاد.
Welcome everybody. In today's program we're going to examine what's happened in those 40 years, in the 40 years since really the promise of democracy presented itself, but was quickly in Iran, but was quickly extinguished by the clerical authoritarianism of the mullahs who are currently ruling Iran today. So we'll examine what's happened since then, but we'll also, I think, equally importantly, look forward. Examine what's happened in the last 40 years, what's happening today, and what that tells us about prospects for change in Iran. And as we all know, what's happening today in Iran is certainly not what the rulers in Tehran would wish for their country. The country is up in arms, literally. More and more people every day are expressing, either by word or deed, their dissatisfaction with the revolutionary ideology that governs the country. So there really is I would say a wide open prospect for change that our experts will be talking about. You know, there are lots of, I've seen over the last couple of weeks, a lot of events and commentary about the 40th anniversary and what's happening in Iran and blah, 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 blah. You know, there are a lot of supposed experts out there who pretend to know Iran. Some do, many don't. And one of the values of today's events is that we are going to hear from people who really do know Iran. Suna Samsami and Ali Safavi, well, first of all, are Iranians, but second of all, represent an organization which is, I would argue, more organic and more connected to the people of Iran and to what's going on inside Iran than almost anybody I can think of. The Mujahideen al-Khalq and its offshore or external organization, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, have really been fighting and dying in Iran for all of those 40 years. And everybody in that organization has lost somebody at the hands of the regime. So they've experienced the reality of Iran personally, and I think as a result, their commitment to changing Iran is fervent and constant. And for that reason, again, I think what we'll hear today is based on a level of personal experience, personal insight, and incredible connectivity to what is happening inside Iran. And for that reason, it is both unique and authoritative.
انتظامی با آتش کشیدن بچه‌های غیور کازرون.
سوریه رو مرج بر خامنه‌ای! مرج بر دیکتاتور!
Our first speaker today will be Suna Samsami, who is the U.S. representative of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. And Suna will be talking about, give a quick summary of the past 40 years, a look at the uprising and where it's come from and where it's going, and then talk also about the role of the resistance and the prospects for change in Iran. Before turning to you, Suna, I just want to point out one part of that video that really struck me, and it may not be immediately evident to everybody, but there were lots of pictures of banners with Maryam Rajavi, the leader of the MEK, the resistance. You know, don't take those things for granted, in the sense that this woman is enemy number one of the regime. Anybody associated with her or the movement is subject to the most violent repression and the intense attention of all the security services in the country. So, you know, while it might sort of not seem remarkable to you that there are big banners with her hanging from the roads, I think it's important to remember that everybody associated with that action, the people who printed it, the people who put it, who photographed it, the people who hung it, the people who distributed it, they are taking incredible risks with their own lives and their families' lives. And if you don't believe that, just remember what happened in the summer of 1988, when the government of Iran murdered, killed, executed in the span of about 4 months, 30,000 MEK members. From June to September, these were people who had been imprisoned, who had been charged but not convicted with political crimes. And because the regime so feared their potential for derailing the revolution, they had them murdered. They were killing them so fast they couldn't bury them. They were hanging them en masse from cranes. So again, the people who put those banners up are very mindful of what happened to their predecessors. So this isn't some kind of game they're playing. This is a matter of life and death that is very real. So yes. Suna, I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Early, for introduction, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our event today on the February 11th, marking the historic victory of anti-monarchic revolution in 1979. Before I continue on my speech, I want to follow what Ambassador Adam Early mentioned. What are the kind of sacrifices these people, when they have a flag or a picture of Mrs. Rajavi on the streets or any corner of Iran? This is a book that I have in front of me. This is a partial list of 120,000 people that have been executed through years in Iran because standing or anyhow any association with the MEK, Iranian opposition, prominent opposition inside Iran. And it's pages and pages I have in front of me, list of their names, age as young as 12, 13 years of age, girls and boys, to mothers of 70 years of age and so on, that they have been any way been associated with MEK, you know, supporting them, providing money for them, standing in prison for their cause of their freedom in Iran, but somehow associated with the, and the book is available here for anyone that wants to come and look at the book. This is only a name of 20,000 of them, which we gathered from inside Iran with high risk of families that provide this information to us. And today it has been the most valuable asset we have as a for the history of people in the last 40 years that have been resisting to the Ayatollahs in Iran. So once again, today, February 11th, marks the historic victory of anti-monarchic revolution in 1979, when the nationwide protest by Iranian people toppled the Shah dictatorship, known for his notorious Evin prison and Savak, and lavish spending of his corrupt regime. Short after, however, Khomeini essentially stole the leadership of the genuine revolution and installed a clerical regime. The mullahs betrayed the lofty ideals of the revolution. Iranian people were chanting and wanted democracy, but the regime put a theocracy in power. Through all these years, especially more clearly since 2017, the Iranian people have demanded regime change in Iran. The regime now, it's at its weakest point and running out of options. Today, I would like to elaborate on three areas. One, why we call Iranian regime so vulnerable. And number two, what is the domestic picture in Iran? And the widespread and increasingly organized protest inside Iran. And number three, what is the viable alternative to the regime in Iran? So on the terms of the Iranian regime be in its weakest point possible in the last 40 years, the Iranian people's conflict against the theocracy is not new. It started in day one. In 1979, Khomeini had to establish his unpopular theocracy through intimidation, suppression of free speech, foreign war, elimination of political parties, and trend of human rights violation that had made Iran, the regime, into a pariah. So the regime's first source of weakness is lack of popular legitimacy. The Iranian people are calling for establishment of a republic based on democracy and separation of religion and state. In contrast to regime's attempt to paint a picture of strength on its 40th year in power, its reality at its weakest point in history. Corruption is rampant. Supreme Leader Khamenei owns dozens of major money foundations in Iran. One of them, known as Setad, S-E-T-A-D, has over $95 million worth of assets, most of which came as a result of confiscation of wealth of poor Iranian citizens. And it has been reported that Larijani, who's head of the judiciary and supposed to technically be in charge of corruption cases, we have found he has more than 63 personal bank accounts full of embezzled public money. Credit institutions tied to the regime have stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from depositors, leading to daily protests. Zمان al-Hujaj is one of these institutions. Zمان al-Hujaj. It grew to 500 branches all over Iran and managed hundreds of millions of dollars. It then lent a major portion of investor savings to government and military officials and declared that it cannot pay back the investors. The value of national currency against other major currencies have dropped over 70% just last year. The purchasing power of Iranian workers dropped by more than 48% in early June 2018. Regime officials are now pointing to inflation, reduction of purchasing power, unemployment, and poverty as code of regime mega challenges. A prominent Iranian economist said recently, 30% of country's population, which is 26 million out of 84 million people, live in absolute poverty, while Iran sits in gas and oil number 2 in the world. And 6% are technically starving. A December study by a research center of Iranian parliament showed more and more people slipping to poverty, especially in 2018. In September, a cautious report by the regime's parliament itself said that unemployment figures are alarming and soaring trend will give rise to crisis. This is the quotation of the regime. According to the study, more than 3 million job seekers had been added to those already unemployed during the years 2014 to 2017. Independent economists put unemployment figures at close to 40%. The regime has demonstrated its inability to deal with these crises. At the same time, in order to cover up its weakness at home, it has escalated its interference and warmongering in the region. Its terrorism, meddling, and missile program are major contributors to the chaos and instability in the region. Billions of dollars are spent to advance its agenda in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. The Iranian people want none of them. And on the issue of the uprisings, in December of 2017 and early 2018, Iranians in all 31 provinces rose up against the regime, first protesting against rising prices, but quickly turned into political chanting like regime change in Iran, and they demanded regime change. And you saw some of the pictures of it, very few of the hundreds of pictures and clips coming from Iran. The New York Times reported, quote, "It's an unusually bold act of defiance. Protesters in Tehran and elsewhere called for the resignation of Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei and witnessed described crowds chanting, 'Death to dictator,' and 'clerics should get lost.'" The fact is that these protests were simmering for years with smaller acts of dissent spread country by workers, students, nurses, women, teachers, prisoners, defrauded investors, farmers, and others. Last week, Khamenei acknowledged that the Iranian people have deep-seated economic grievances. He said people, quote, "complaining." The protesters especially blamed the regime's corruption and its foreign adventurism for their pains. They chant, "No to Gaza, no to Lebanon, my life for Iran." They say, "No to Gaza, no to Lebanon, my life for Iran," or "Leave Syria, think about us instead." "Leave Syria, think about us instead." Protests and strikes in various cities have continued with support and guidance of units of resistance organized by the primary opposition, Mujahideen MEK. The regime's interior ministry said in an assessment that 85% of protesters were under age of 35. Majority of population in Iran is a youth population. In 2018 alone, 10,000 people were detained because of demonstrations. At least 50 were killed. 14 more were tortured to death while in detention. But importantly, the regime couldn't stop these people and these demonstrations. The protests have now expanded to all sectors of society. The bazaar protests were the first major people that in 40 years, which used to viewed as a traditional supporter of the regime, also came to the scene, and you see they keep striking after the other. So if the Iranian people are rising in such numbers against the regime whose power is being eroded day by day, then the question is, who's the alternative? On the question of the alternative, Tehran's reaction to organized opposition is a clear indication that there is a viable alternative to the regime in form of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI, which was established in Tehran in 1981. The NCRI is essentially a parliament in exile with hundreds of members, half of them women, including athletes, politicians, members of ethnic and religious minorities, musicians, artists, economists, and others. Its main component is principal opposition, MEK. The NCRI president-elect, Maryam Rajavi, represents the demands and aspirations of Iranian people and protesters in recent years. Units of resistance posted her pictures, as you saw in the film, in major highways, in the streets, in every corner of Iran. Mrs. Rajavi's 10-point plan for future of Iran includes policy formulations like separation of church and state, abolition of death penalty, universal suffrage and elections, gender equality, peace and coexistence with neighbors, freedom of press and speech. In the NCRI's mind, the Iran of tomorrow should essentially be a free, democratic, and non-nuclear republic. It's no wonder, then, that the Iranian regime wanted to bomb the Free Iran rally organized annually in Paris in 2018. The bomb plot ended up with an official Iranian diplomat being arrested in Belgium, which is an unprecedented development in itself. The regime views the MEK as an existential threat, capable of organizing protests and leading them to overthrow the government. In 2018, Khamenei personally named MEK in his public speeches 4 times, and this is just last year of 2018. And Rouhani has directly blamed all these protests on MEK and calling the Macron, president of French, Rouhani directly blaming MEK for organizing these public protests. At the same time, regime has launched an extensive and astonishing demonizing campaign against MEK. Total of 19 movies and 136 movies and videos. These are run in channels so many times. 519 books published against MEK in order to deviate the attention of the youth from the realities of the MEK and the opposition. And I'm talking about, like, just in 2018, 18 major books were published. There are numerous blogs, websites, and accounts that are operational aims against MEK to demonize it. Some of the regime also pays journalists abroad to publish fake stories against the MEK. The head of the major Canadian think tank revealed that Iranian regime embassy offered him $80,000 to refer MEK as a cult in his publications. But none of the efforts and propaganda by the regime have been effective to neutralize the MEK. That explains why in January of 2018, When the protests were at their height, Rouhani personally phoned French President Macron and asked him to limit the activities of MEK in France. And Macron refused. A former minister of Iranian regime labor said MEK were the ones making the calls for protest. With these slogans, they were able to gain the support of a number of people. This is quotation of him. A website tied to the intelligence ministry said, MEK have infiltrated into many social sectors among all walks of life of Iranian people, including truck drivers, bazaar store owners, people whose life-saving have been stolen by state-run firms, teachers, workers, and so on, unquote. Friday Prayer leaders, including those in city of Qom, said, do not allow MEK to change these slogans and seize the rallies. Among regime officials said 70% of the clips calling for protest and turmoil are from channels connected to the MEK. These are unquote again. Unable to defeat MEK, then the regime resorted to terrorism. At least 3 major terrorist plots coordinated by the regime against the NCRI and MEK specifically were uncovered in 2018 in US, Albania, and France. Expulsion of 5 Tehran diplomats from Europe, including its ambassador in Albania, is unprecedented and clearly indicates the regime is desperately resorting to terrorism to ensure its survival. So what I want to conclude is the Iranian regime is very weak, weakest in its history. It lacks internal legitimacy, as you see in the show, in the clip. The primary enemies are the Iranian people and their organized resistance, MEK and the NCRI. The regime's internal policies, its human rights violations, economic mismanagement have depleted its strategic capital. It has no solution to these massive crises and no way to curb the uprisings. At the same time, its regional designs are not going anywhere. Put simply, the regime is at a strategic dead end. However, there is an alternative, NCRI, the Iranian people relying on units of rebellion that you saw some of them in the picture, and the organized opposition will be able to lead the true democratic change within Iran without foreign interference. However, for this change to happen, it is essential that we recognize the right of the Iranian people to unseat their repressive rulers.
آقای صفوی، در جریان نشست خانم صمصامی هم اشاره کردند به موضوع بمبگذاری نشست سالانه مجاهدین در پاریس و همچنین 2 نفر رو در امریکا به اتهام جاسوسی برای رژیم تهران و علیه مجاهدین به اصطلاح بازداشت کردند. تحریم‌های جدیدی علیه رژیم تهران حتی از سوی اروپا، اتحادیه اروپا وضع شد. اطلاعات تازه‌ای در مورد این پرونده‌ها شما دارید که به ما بدین؟
تا اونجایی که می‌دونیم مزدور رژیم که توی اروپا دستگیر شدند، در واقع بیشتر از 2 تا بودند، 4 نفر بودند، از جمله یک به اصطلاح دیپلمات ارشد رژیم که رئیس بخش اطلاعات رژیم در اروپا بود، اسدالله اسدی. اینا در زندان بلژیک هستند و منتظر محاکمه هستند. 2 نفری هم که توی آمریکا دستگیر شدن، اونها هم در انتظار محاکمه و در زندان به سر میبرند و تلاش‌های رژیم برای آزادی اونها به جایی نرسیده و خب نشون میده که رژیم از دیپلمات‌هاش و از عناصرش در کشورهای خارجی برای کارهای جاسوسی و تروریستی استفاده میکنه.
Ali Safavi is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of NCRI. He's going to talk about the foreign policy of the NCRI and international relations and how foreign countries can best support what they're doing. Let me just give you ask you a question to sort of focus the attention a little bit, Ali. You know, there are those who say that by getting tough on the Iranian regime, criticizing Trump, saying getting tough on the Iranian regime just strengthens it because it causes Iranians to rally around their flag and be more patriotic than they would otherwise be. In talking about how foreign nations can best support the people of Iran, could you just bear that question in mind and maybe answer a little bit?
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, Ambassador Lereli, and thank you, Ms. Samsami, for your presentation. I guess let me start off by answering your question. The fact is that this whole narrative that if the Western countries, and in particular the United States, pursue a tough policy on Iran, that the Iranian people will support the regime and rally around the leadership, I think is a false narrative. And I think the video that you saw, and of course, hundreds of others that we have, clearly demonstrate that that has not happened. Indeed, the most prevalent, or one of the most prevalent slogans in Iran over the past year, even after the United States pulled out of the JCPOA, was the enemy is right here. They lie when they say to America. And so Iranian people blame the mullah's regime for the current misery, for the current destitution, for the current problems. A corrupt gang that has ruled this nation basically stolen their wealth, used it on foreign wars, and of course it's a corrupt regime. So in this sense, if anything, the Iranian people would welcome a tough policy on Iran, not vice versa. And with that, let me segue into what I was going to speak about was when we talk about Western countries, four decades of policy in dealing with Iran, we can find a common thread throughout. An attempt to work with the ruling regime, whether through carrot or sticks, in the hopes of moderating its behavior. And I think lost in this whole approach is where do the people of Iran stand and what do they want? The track record of this policy speaks for itself. Over the past 40 years, this course of action has not produced meaningful results. The Iranian regime has not moderated for the simple reason that, as the Persian saying goes, no snake will ever give birth to a dove. Major wars in the region over the past 40 years, actually 3 major wars, enormously benefited the regime in Iran. The 1991 First Persian Gulf War, the 2001 war in Afghanistan, and of course the 2003 invasion of Iraq benefited the regime to a point where even the regime's officials said publicly that the United States neutralized 3 of our main enemies on the ground: Iraq, Taliban, and the main Iranian opposition, the Mujahideen. Reaping the windfalls of these 3 conflicts, the mullahs have been wreaking havoc in the region, as Ms. Samsami mentioned. And when we look at a snapshot of the past 40 years, we see the following. During President Reagan's administration, the effort was to trade arms with the mullahs in exchange for the American hostages who were being held in Lebanon by Tehran proxies. At the same time, at the behest of Tehran, the State Department attempted to marginalize the MEK in the United States. After Khomeini's death and during George Herbert Walker Bush's administration, the policy was a very inconsistent one. During those years, if you remember, the myth of moderation began to infect policy inside the Beltway, and Rafsanjani was dubbed as a pragmatist with whom the West could engage. Then we go to the Clinton administration. Mohammad Khatami, a regime stalwart, was crowned with the title of being a moderate. Europe started speaking about constructive dialogue with the regime and provided the mullahs with tremendous economic concessions and benefits. The greatest overture, of course, was the designation of the MEK as a terrorist group at the behest of Tehran. The Iranian officials publicly, the American officials, the State Department officials publicly acknowledged that the designation of the MEK had been a goodwill gesture to the newly elected president, Mohammad Khatami. Obviously, the designation had no legal justification because, as you know, and this is now history, America's second highest court compelled the Secretary of State to delist the MEK, and of course that was done about 7 years ago. When President George W. Bush came into office, we all know what happened. The invasion of Iraq, and of course that led to the ascension of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad into the presidency and enabled the regime to advance its long-held dream of occupying Iraq and, of course, as they said, liberating Jerusalem via Karbala, something that the 8-year war with Iraq did not achieve for the regime. The U.S. invasion did, and of course everybody knows now that Iraq is basically the backyard of the Iranian regime with hundreds of militia groups that are funded and trained by Tehran. In fact, as part of that policy, a quid pro quo with Tehran, the United States and the UK bombed MEK camps in Ashraf, effectively neutralizing a main bulwark against the regime on the ground inside Iraq. Of course, when we get to the Obama administration, we see the continuation of the same policy. The Iran nuclear deal provided the Iranian regime with billions of dollars, which were poured into the coffers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps and Khamenei and other regime leaders. And you see that Iran used that money not to improve the lives of Iranians, but to prop up Bashar al-Assad in Syria, to support Hezbollah in Lebanon, to send missiles to the Houthis in Yemen, and of course to organize and train militias inside of Iraq. In effect, this policy empowered the regime in Tehran, and of course we now know that its missile program has advanced and is a major source of concern for the international community. The U.S., of course, also violated its commitment to the MEK who were in Ashraf and protected persons under the Fourth Geneva Convention, and we all know that the Iraqi government, the puppet government of Nouri al-Maliki, the Iranian regime and its proxies launched 7 attacks against the MEK in Iraq, resulting in the death of 150 members and the wounding of 1,300 more. Obviously, the proponents of appeasement warned that if their brand of diplomacy and continued dialogue with Tehran rulers fails, this will lead to war. Opponents of appeasement are regularly dismissed as warmongers, whereas the regime is branded as an evolving moderate system that holds election and faces no serious existential threat from the people or from the legitimate opposition. And at every turn, the West has replied at every turn, the regime has replied the West has replied to Tehran's terrorism and hostage-taking by appeasing it. Churchill once famously said that an appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile hoping it will eat him last. Simply put, in the strategic face-off between the Iranian people and the Iranian regime, Western countries have by and large, and until recently, have been on the wrong side of history and provided a lifeline to the mullahs. From our perspective, the right policy is to recognize the rights of the Iranian people and the organized opposition to bring down this regime. Unlike Syria and other countries suffering from dictatorships, Iran has a historic, real, and viable alternative. And I think while the United States' departure from its past policies, whose first victims were the Iranian people and the resistance, is a welcome development, from our point of view, the ultimate solution for addressing the crisis in the region is to discard the mullah's regime and bring down this illegitimate regime at the hands of the Iranian people and resistance. As Ms. Samsami said, the recognition of the National Council of Resistance as the sole democratic alternative is imperative to rectifying and ending the disastrous policy of appeasement over the past 4 decades. And we think this is what is needed to reverse the tragic course of events over the past 40 years and support a firm and realistic approach that leads to the Washington's stated policy objectives of freedom and democracy, as well as peace and security in that part of the world. Thank you.
بحث آینده ایران به کدام سو میره و چون در این نشستم شما اشاره کردین اشاره شد به هر حال به بحث این نگرانی که دامن زده میشه در مورد سوریه‌ای شدن ایران، میخواستم کمی در این مورد لطفاً توضیح بدید.
این قبل از هر چیز تبلیغاتیه که خود رژیم دامن میزنه، در حالی که ایران بر حسب سابقه تاریخیش، بر حسب تمدن 3000 سالش، بر حسب فرهنگ غنیش، بر حسب مردم بسیار آگاه و تحصیل کردهش به هیچ وجه قابل مقایسه با هیچ کشور دیگری در منطقه نیست. شاید تنها با مصر بشه مقایسهش کرد که اون هم یک تمدن قدیمی داره. بنابراین مردم ایران و قومیت‌های مختلف ایران، اقلیت‌های مذهبی ایران، همه قبل از این که مسئلهشون ملیت‌های خودشون باشه یا مذهب خودشون باشه، همشون خودشون رو ایرانی میدونن و بنابراین تغییر این رژیم و سرنگونی آخوندها به هیچ وجه ایران رو تبدیل به لیبی یا عراق یا سوریه نخواهد کرد. ضمن اینکه به خاطر داشته باشید که اولا منبع بی‌ثباتی و جنگ فرقه‌ای و کشت و کشتار در اون کشورها خود رژیم ایران هست و وقتی این رژیم از صحنه محو بشه مبنای بی‌ثباتی دیگه وجود نداره. ثانیاً و برخلاف اون کشورها در ایران ما یک اپوزیسیون قدرتمند سازمان یافته و سراسری رو داریم، سازمان مجاهدین خلق ایران و شورای ملی مقاومت که یک رهبری شناخته شده داره، خانم مریم رجبی، و یک برنامه مشخص داره، برنامه 10 ماده‌ای ایشون که آزادی عقاید، آزادی مطبوعات، انتخابات آزاد، برابری جنسی، برابری پیروان ادیان مختلف، ملیت‌های مختلف و یک ایران غیر اتمی و یک جمهوری رو نوید میده. بنابراین فکر میکنم که نباید گول تبلیغات رژیم رو خورد، چون در نهایت این نوع تبلیغات معنیش اینه که بهتره با همین آخوندها ما مماشات کنیم و بسازیم و مردم ایران نشون دادن در قیام 1 سال اخیرشون که نه با مدره ها کاری دارن، به اصطلاح مدره ها، و نه با سخت‌سرا و باند ولی فقیه. شعارشون اینه اصلاح طلب اصولگرا، دیگه تمام ماجرا.